Hi, and welcome to the first of a four-part series entitled All About MCAT. We're planning to bring you a series of shows that will describe various aspects of Missoula Community Access Television. We're going to talk about issues facing public access today in a kind of general way across the nation and in a very specific way in Missoula, Montana. This is the first show that we're going to do. It's called The Basics. What we're hoping to do in this show is show you some of the programs that have been made at this Missoula Community Access Television Center in the last 10 years and go over some of the things in our Access Television Handbook that gets people started making programs right here in Missoula. I've got some guests with me today. They have graciously consented to be kind of the guinea pigs. This is their first TV appearance. Is that right in your lives? No? Okay. It's not their first TV experience.
Looks like we have a discussion topic already.
I'd like to introduce the people with me tonight. There's Bruce Turpensee. There's Penelope Whitney. They are people who live in Missoula. They're interested in access. I said, well, gee, you could come to the orientation, or we can have a TV orientation so more people can share that process. On my right here is Michael Regan. He's a member of the Board of Directors of Missoula Community Access Television, and he's agreed to help me host this show. So there's going to be 3 more shows coming up. We're going to deal with the Artist in the Schools program that we've run here for 7 years in the next show, and then we're going to have a discussion of controversial programming, and then a discussion of what the future of access might be. So I'd like to start the show by asking Bruce and Penelope, what brought them to access to begin with. Now, they've already told me, they have a major curiosity, and they've kind of come as a favor to me as my guinea pigs. But I'm going to let them talk so you get to know them a little bit, too. Bruce, why don't you talk about, being in Missoula and your job a little bit, if you want to. You can. It's okay.
My job at the Crystal?
Yeah, I would point out that I met Bruce, he's a volunteer at the Crystal Theater where I volunteer, and we were there together, and I kind of pitched the idea of him coming on the show at that time.
So I'm interested in film, and I thought this was a great experience, great place to get a lot of equipment availability, and I would play with ideas for doing a show. It's interesting.
And I've always wanted to hold a video camera and take pictures of things.
Right. Well, no, we discussed that. They didn't have specific ideas in mind, but I told them, I'd ask you, if you made a dream show, what would it be? I mean, just saying you had all the time in the world, or, I don't know, what would come to your mind about making a television program?
Actually, the only idea, I had 2 ideas. One was doing something like teaching a chemistry class, and the other was maybe showing documentaries, following people in Missoula around, and then, showing little day in the lives of people around town.
Oh, yeah. And Phil, you're in the creative writing program at the U.
Right.
I mean, do you see a kind of crossover of your interest in writing and a visual medium like video?
In some ways, it seems like the visual medium would just be so much easier than having to sit down with a pen. You've got the images right there. You can put them together in all kinds of ways, and the viewer can take away what they want to take away, and you kind of aren't as responsible as you normally are. I mean, I know that's not really true, but that's just what it feels like to me.
That's so funny, because I've always had that, the opposite idea.
Yeah.
That if I would only concentrate on writing, I could make anything happen. Whereas when I think of the video, it'd be great. I just need 6 sailors, in sailor suits dancing in this bathroom, But now, which of my friends are going to do that? Where can I get the costumes? So it always seems like, there's this huge obstacle. And then I'd admire the beauty of writing so much because I think, gee, if I had a pencil and some paper, there I would be. But what confronts me about that is the kind of loneliness of a writer. But I do think of that. I mean, in a way, that draws me to video because just by nature, it has to be kind of a cooperative thing. And you're right, in a way, I always feel it's less responsibility. Because I want to take this opportunity to thank John and Jason Gobles and John Cedarstein, who worked on this set a tremendous amount. And I'm never a control freak myself, so I always think, wow, God, they'll change it again or whatever. But it's just so fun to have you kind of set in the video world is cooperative by nature. You kind of set like a mile parameter, and then all this stuff kind of happens around it.
Right.
That's intrigued me, and I guess I think of it as being less lonely. I don't know. And Michael, you've done some video work. I mean, you're a board member.
Yeah, I originally came down here because my favorite TV show had been canceled, and I was hoping I could revive it here. Johnny Bago. It's a story of a fugitive running around the country in a Winnebago. But,
was that an MCAT show?
no, it was just on NBC for about 3 weeks and got canceled.
Wow.
On the lam from the mafia, and he had 2 ex-wives after him in the FBI. And I thought, man, somebody's got to revive this.
Did it work out? Did you revive it?
And when I realized production was going to cost about $1 million a week, I couldn't even afford the Winnebago. So.
Yeah.
Should we?
Well, I mean, see, there's another element
Could
of
use a wagon.
public access TV is it's a kind of scale down process in a way. But you know what I mean? It's like you do think of things, and I think everyone that kind of comes into public access is kind of coming to compromise anyway. Because it's true, we've got a lot of really great equipment here. But then if you look at it on a Hollywood and scale or a network corporate TV scale, it's very small potatoes.
But on the other hand, if you were in any other city, you would have to pay hundreds of dollars to rent equipment and to use an editing facility and things like that, where those things are at your disposal here.
Have you guys had experience with access in other cities, like in San Francisco? Or?
Yeah, somewhat.
Somewhat, yeah. Not like television access, but like film foundations.
Right. Oh, that's right. That's right.
And I actually worked for a documentary series on PBS that you guys sometimes air their shows still.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well,
That's one of the things you learn down here as it is. I mean, you mentioned that, maybe you don't have the big budgets here, but you also don't have 40 guys in Brooks Brothers suits watching you every move, telling you what to do. You have incredible freedom once you sort of give up the Spielbergian ideas. You realize you can do anything down here. I mean, I worked in Hollywood a little while, and then, I realized that I was going to have to work 5 years and just to be able to bring donuts to the people who operate the equipment that you can get your hands on here in the second week. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I think that is an interesting point about access and the various people that bring their interest to it, is that here a lot of people might just have interest in content. When they think of the pictures, they don't think in terms of a TV production, a Hollywood production. And I know we're always, kind of towing a line between those two worlds. Sometimes people will call on the phone and say, "Who did this show? This audio is terrible," or, stuff like, "Why don't you tell them to move the camera?" Or they feel like we have produced the show or we're responsible for the way it looks or something, and we ought to do something about it. And I know it is real difficult, to come up with a balance where we will try to train people as specifically as they want to be trained. If somebody wants to come in and talk about this wireless microphone I'm wearing compared to this omnidirectional you guys are all sharing on the table, but we'll talk about the nature of shotgun microphone versus omni versus wireless or whatever. That if somebody wants to do a very in-depth training, a lot of that happens here one-on-one. They're a group class, which you got out of by doing this, so I notice we're not really talking about the handbook, and we haven't used our rigged questions yet. But in that way, here we are hoping that people will pay attention to production value, but in a way that's not our primary concern. Our primary concern is that they're able to get the equipment, and they're able, at least initially, to put forth content.
And I think, if you look at the history of film, some of the best movies have been made by people who were forging whole new relationships with technology. I mean, a lot of the really good movies now are coming out of Iran and places like that where people haven't been watching TV for 50 years, and they look at things in a completely different way. They don't have these preset notions about film. It's a wide open world now. It's sort of a Wild West, and a lot of really, I turn on MCAT sometimes and I'm like, wow, I never would have thought of putting the camera there or doing that. It's a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
Oh, because you're saying they're not kind of schooled in what almost becomes a cliched language of close-up, cutaway, 3-shot. Oh, we're being told we all have to be louder. Okay.
The other thing you learn down here is the signals from cameramen.
Right. Yeah. They're back there, where they kind of line themselves over the wall. We had discussed, bringing them into the shot or something. So
Yeah.
It was more apparent to people at home
That's
what the
nice.
physical space is like and stuff like that.
We're getting postmodern here, Joel.
Right.
I don't see this on Oprah.
Well, anyway, I think that, aside from all the handbook issues, that's an interesting thing that I wouldn't mind, just making sure to underscore is that we are here to provide technical training. And that is like our main mission. But we accept the fact that a lot of people are going to be real interested in technical things and they're going to really concentrate a lot of energies on it. Other people could care less. What they're interested in is the message of their organization or the lecture that's going on. I mean, they want to make sure the technical properties are good, but that's not the primary thing on their mind. So often we find we're cutting that balance between making sure people get their hands on the equipment because they need their message to be sent out, and making sure the message is understood because they have the microphones hooked up right, at least right, or that there's enough information. And that's often what we tell people is that, even if the picture isn't of the greatest quality, if the sound is clear, their constituency is going to hang on there. And when I say constituency, that kind of reminds me of one of our missions. And I think I used the word before we started, narrowcasting. And that's something that Access had addressed itself to kind of philosophically. Because what they called the initial rise of, wireless transmission of this information was called broadcasting. They're sowing the great seed across the nation. But one of the ideas of Access was to engage in what's called narrowcasting. So that if you have a show and your target audience is 12 people, that's a valid show for Access. An important administrative topic that we bring up is first come, first serve. Because we don't want to engage in saying, well, this seems a more likely program than this one. So it's supposed to be a pretty darn big umbrella where we would never engage in discussion of what's a more important show than another.
So how do you decide what to air at, say, the prime time slot?
Okay, that does become difficult. We were just talking about that today. What other Access centers have done was guarantee people like 13 weeks, and then after the 13 weeks, maybe they would be bumped from that slot. I think in the startup, especially in the use of live programming, there have been a lot of people very strongly committed to programming and programming slots. So we do have some that have been going on for years, but it's always been seemingly okay. Though just today we're saying, boy, if any more level of activity picks up, maybe we'll have to do something to figure out how to open up, just as you say, these primetime slots. Some other avenues we have to provide a little relief for that, and when you can see it when we do our tour, is an automated switching system that's here. We didn't have that until about 7 months ago. Remember we were talking about how you could make that program for the timing?
Yeah, I have it for you.
Yeah, it's like a computer program that will tell the tapes when to run and when to stop. So we hadn't done cable casting in the past without anyone being here. It was all done manually. So now we're just starting to do a little programming on Saturday. And if we get more decks to put in the cable cast tower that you'll see, we'll be able to load a lot more programming. So I can have Saturday programming till later and weekday programming till later, Sunday programming till later.
Do you actually broadcast 24/7?
Yeah, the station cablecast 24/7. When there isn't taped or live programming, there's a message board. And we serve a lot of organizations that way. They send us press releases they might send to all the other media, and then we try. It's kind of a very fast job of graphic design that we do in there, which is kind of fun. But we try to make personalized pages for each announcement that kind of go in a slideshow during the times that we're off air or in between those hour times. Like we try to start at 2:30, kind of on those quarter-hour increments. But we don't require that the shows fit, 28, 50 exactly. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of mix and match going on there.
It's really kind of the essence of MCAT is it gives a broadcast outlet to people who just couldn't get it anywhere else. I mean, even if it's just a press release or if it's, reviving Johnny Bago, anything. I mean, these are things you're going to be able to do other places. It's kind of, to use a supply side economics sort of take on it, it's opening up the market, Everybody can come in here. And TV is so powerful, and yet it's so closed. You can work many, many years in TV and still not get your ideas out there.
Yeah, and that closure is something that is kind of addressed in the handbook. Part of discussing the history of Access was in general. I'll do like a really fast of my understanding, of how the funding mechanism worked and came about. Was that like the first access model were rural areas where they would put antennas on the top of mountains that got great reception. And then they thought, well, let's share. Let's use this one antenna and have a bunch of houses in the valley be served by this antenna. So suddenly you have a kind of a point source that was serving, just a few households. The idea got bigger as cable itself, linking households with a hard wire to an information source got bigger. And the most basic notion about it was, because the cable company is using any municipality's right-of-way, as if the state, the county, the city, they're using those telephone poles, the alleyways, the whole infrastructure of the roadways to lay down this cable and bring it to houses at extraordinary profit. So almost like a utility, they tend to be sole source providers as well. So the rationale of the funding mechanism was, we have these people that are using the municipality's resources to make a tidy profit. What can they give back in exchange for that? And then further than that, you could say, okay, in a way it's a tax, or is it a franchise fee? If you look at your TCI, now AT&T cable bill, it doesn't say, did you know there was free access in your town and here's the station? It says franchise fee at 39 cents or something like that. So of course there's a semi-cooperative and semi-rocky relationship between the very concept itself, the provider, the municipality, and the administrators of the service, in this case MCAT.
Because they actually get to charge consumers for this fee, even
though
it's supposed to be out of their profit.
A fee is charged, I've never done a study on the difference between fees charged in cities without cable access, which they are. I don't think it's as much. However, the fee is charged and it goes into a fund, and the city then gives a certain amount of it to MCAT every year, and some other money is left over and goes to regular city services. So.
Right. But the spirit of the idea, I think, was that cable providers were bringing this wealth of information from all over heck, and especially having a strong impact in semi-rural communities like this, and I'd still describe it as such. So the idea is that you're surrounded by outside information. What could be a better thing than coming up with an information network that was actually locally based and reflected the tastes, interests, and priorities of those people? So that spirit of the Cable Act of 84 and then 96 and stuff translates into funding local access almost to offset the information overload that comes from so many outside sources. It helps communities retain a sense of their own identity, and not they're just like a wash, of microwaves and optical transmissions.
Is there a mandate? Like, do they have to?
Other cities no. I mean,
force cities to supply this.
I mean, I guess that's part of the history part is that a lot of dedicated people in Missoula started really early trying to get the idea of this franchise opportunity available to governmental leaders, and doing surveys and trying to get the community itself turned on to the idea that this was a possibility. Other cities collect the fee and use it for the general fund. And so the utility and the value of that service is always, a debatable topic as well. But I mean, just in my mind, I could see, a pretty neat exchange where there's a lot of outside information being brought in, so there's at least an opportunity for local information to be exchanged.
Which is, goes against the trends of broadcast and mass media, which is like we're getting more and more information from less and less sources.
Or less and less information,
well,
less and less sources.
Depending on how you describe information.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a balance there too. I mean, because I always think about, as the nation gets more homogenized, it's almost a good thing, because people are more together. But then there's always that balance of wanting individual pockets of individuality, kind of the corporate theme versus the small entrepreneur or something like that. Hey, how are we doing for time? What? We got 40 minutes left.
Oh, man.
So
better get out those 6 dancing sailors.
Well, I have the equivalent of the 6 dancing sailors. So this is just a signal to people in the back to queue up this tape, and I'll set it up for the folks at home and the folks on the replay of the show. This is a 20-minute tape. I'll take responsibility for it. I kind of cudgel my brain to come up with an A to Z description of work done at MCAT. I couldn't think of stuff for every letter, and then I kind of spent maybe too much time at the beginning than the end. But Lori, if you're back there, it is time to cue up the tape now.
Floor space. Although the floor space is there, well, they need the floor to stand up.
And the figure, you talked about moving away from it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get away from the other figure.
This is my presentation of a jungle scene, and it was painted on a snowy day here in Missoula in 1979, and I really never painted before, and it sort of came out as artist material for a non-artist, and for somebody that never painted before, it came out, has certain qualities to it, I think.
The knowledge I acquired there has helped me even to this day, because they taught me what paint was made of. They told me how to apply paint. They told me all the techniques of paint. They showed me all the kinds of the brushes you use to put on the paint. See, in art schools, they don't teach you how to apply paint because they don't know how to apply paint.
So what was going on in the art world in Montana at that time?
Well, I think that probably it was around then that we became really aware of the abstract expressions. Mm-hmm. Before then, I mean, they were just coming on the scene nationally.
Tongue starts to touch him, dig deep into it. Wait! Hold it! Not without a latex barrier! I don't even know you!
Hello! You wanted the answers there here. Brutal Truth Psychic Network. Get the scoop from a guy with your one psychic friend. Love, career, money. I specialize in telling you what you already know if you just sit down and think about it. I also give advice on unimportant matters, political decisions, and personal adornment.
Large pit! Wound in my heart! With injury to the earth! Let it pour! Pour forth! Heal the spot!
You know, baby, I'm pretty sick of people speaking about that view, because you know where that big pit there, because maybe that pit put you through college.
And of course, then it says, but now my guilt. All that guilt.
Yes.
It's washed away.
Amen.
In Jesus' blood.
Amen.
I'm glad I'm saved tonight.
Amen.
I hope you'll get saved if you're not saved.
Amen.
Amen. God bless you, and you may be seated.
This is The Awful Truth About Society show by Rebbe Dog the Punk. This would be episode 77, I think, or I don't know what it would be. But I call it Soldiers of Christ Fight to the Death. The devil now rules the world. And that is the absolute truth.
There are several ways to decorate your watercolor paper that you will use for the pages and covers of your book. The dry technique. The watercolor paper may be painted completely dry. Watercolor, thin tempera, and acrylic may be used. Using the dry technique, students are able to have greater control of the color. but as the end result is often tight and less spontaneous looking. Complete one side of the paper and let it dry thoroughly overnight before painting the other side.
Hi, this is Jennifer Copenhaver with Red Light Blinking, and this is Keisha and Heather. And I have a question for you guys. Why is this program so important to you?
Well, the agriculture education program is really cool because we get to come out and we get to work with animals for like an hour and a half every other day, and we don't have to sit inside a classroom. We get to do hands-on work. And then through the FFA, which comes out of the ag program, we get to go all over the place. Like, I'm going to Kentucky.
Provide for the common defense. Promote the general welfare. And secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Never saw it, you would even say it glows like a light bulb. All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names like Pinocchio. They never let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games like
I stopped by to see if he made it all right on time, and his wife was there, and she says, yeah, Jack got out on time this morning, she said. I said, well, good, then I don't have to worry about the job of the lake, at least it's going. She says, yeah, come on in and have some coffee. I want you to meet somebody.
The Milltown Reservoir is the wetland area created by the confluence of the Clark Fork and Big Blackfoot rivers. It provides habitat for local wildlife and recreational opportunities for area residents. The reservoir also contains toxic sediments that contaminate drinking water and threaten downstream wildlife habitat.
Fires, pests, and disease have created catastrophic conditions on 20 million acres of our national forests. Under the Forest Health Plan, their solution is logging. Following the wildfires in '94, this plan has accelerated. In the name of forest health, the Forest Service is violating environmental laws.
Everything we did was through prayer, our people. We didn't call it a religion, but we called it our way of life. Say when the wolf was out hunting, out on the plains, he sees an antelope at a great distance. Now that wolf knows he can't outrun that antelope, and so what he does, he kneels down in the tall grass and wags his tail back and forth. Antelope are very curious, as you guys may know, that hunt. And so he'll come and he'll start circling and circling, and the wolf's still wagging his tail. He gets close enough, boom, there's breakfast, lunch, and snack for the pack.
These 19 men and women are part of a larger group of 1,000 refugees granted visas in a Special Immigration Act 1990 provision. Some have fled Tibet recently, escaping persecution by the Chinese government, while others have been living in Tibetan communities in India, having left Tibet with their families in 1959 when the Dalai Lama fled the country. Please join us in making these latest additions to Missoula's international community feel welcome. There is still a need for basic household furnishings and other supplies, and anyone wanting to help out or just to become a friend is urged to call Nancy Trueheft. That's what it's used for.
Okay, the principle, that's fine. The principle here is the logic of dividing from business from personal. And she's saying, I'm marking on receipts, I'm storing some food separately. She's able to show that. And that's what's important. The IRS is not going to come back to you and say, the person who did it, the percent, is say, no, it's not 50%, it's 48.52. So they're not going to want to figure it out any more accurately than that. And if you're showing them how you separated it, and you're using logic, and you're reasonable about that, you're fine.
Thank you, Jim. My name is Ed Mayer. I'm with the Missoula Housing Authority, and I appreciate your indulgence. I apologize I didn't get this packet out to you in your packet on Friday. The Housing Authority is requesting that you set a hearing for one of our housing projects that we have proposed. It's a project at 34th and Russell. We intend to build 53 units of affordable housing, and as part of that development, we are pursuing a tax exemption, property tax exemption for the property.
I'll be chairing this committee of the whole. We also are pleased to have with us the county commissioners and the mayor. And the item on our agenda is a briefing on the Y2K, from the Y2K Planning Committee, and I'll just go ahead and let you guys brief us, and then I believe we'll have time for some questions.
As Stan mentioned, I came to Montana as a National Science Foundation visiting professor at MSU in Bozeman, and thought since I had 2 years in Montana, I'd like to do an article on something about Montana. And given that I've worked extensively in the history of aviation, I thought I'd see if there was enough aviation in Montana to do an article on. And in very short order, I realized that I was writing a book.
I'm Bob Brown, and I'm the director of the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula. The year 1945 was a pivotal one in world history. And in order to commemorate the end of World War II, we have interviewed the following Missoulians for their recollections and memories of that very important year.
Okay, well, let's start with what is your most vivid memory of the year 1945?
Probably the breakup of the Nazi forces while we were in Germany by that time.
We got in New York about 10 o'clock in the morning, June the 10th, 1940. About 11 o'clock, New York time, Italy went to war. And Mussolini made a speech. He said it's going to be a short war, you know. And one officer, he was on top of the deck, and he shook his head. He said, fellas, this is going to be a long, long trip. And by God, it was a long trip, believe me.
You might also give us weather conditions at the site or at the scene. Also, if possible, describe the LZ to us. If not after your first call, then when you're on the scene on the radio.
Organizing for Justice in the New Millennium. You know, what a wonderful title. What a wonderful goal. What a wonderful vision. And I commend and congratulate all who have participated in developing, sponsoring, supporting, implementing, financing this conference.
They brought me here and they got me up at 4 a.m. this morning to catch a plane from Portland and led me to think I was going to lose my life over Missoula, and sent me to 2 press interviews this afternoon and a potluck and a speech tonight, and more of the same tomorrow and more of the same the next day, and speeches on Saturday. And people said to me, why would you do such a thing, busy as you are? And I said, because I love those people. I just love those people. There are 2 groups in this country who are monitoring the right that I have the most tremendous admiration for. It's not to say I don't have admiration for the others, but these 2 are very, very high for me. One is the Center for Democratic Renewal in Atlanta, Georgia, which is an organization that used to be the Anti-Klan Network, and it's based in the most progressive thinking and staffed primarily by people of color, and has done just extraordinary work in that state and around the country. And the other one is the Montana Human Rights Network.
Point was that you guys do such beautiful writing. It's always so powerful and often maybe sometimes so funny or just wonderfully well crafted use of words that express a lot of what you guys are about, and I appreciate so much your sharing that with us. And so my main goal was that you had an audience to share this with, and so that's why I created the Young Adult Writer Series.
One day, in the new dawn's light, a cloud is painted quiet magenta. Time passes into an indescribable beauty, that of silver streaks of interwoven light and purity. Then the blue heavens open, as if a tome of quiet fragility.
How's everyone doing tonight? We are so happy to be back here in the Flathead Valley. It's great. Thank you all for coming out tonight. This is called Continental Drift.
That's it. I'm done. I'm not working there anymore. Putts. I'm done with them. That's it.
Heard this before.
Shut up. This time it's for real. I'm not going back. Not going back.
I was hoping today would be different for me, but it doesn't look like it will be.
Hi, Mr. Smitty. It's Stuart from 4C down there. Listen, I locked my keys in my car, and I seem to. The keys of my apartment are on there also. So if you could.
But economics was really the science of how people behave
Right.
and how they deal with each other, and that's what makes it a life science and not simply a sterile science. But would you explain the anti-capitalistic mentality?
Well, yes, I think it's very interesting. I skimmed over it again, and he takes, von Mises takes different aspects, and it has to do with the understanding or lack of understanding of people. And he says the sovereign consumer, the consumer is the one that regulates the market and controls the market by buying or not buying what's offered.
So I don't really have a planned speech, but what I thought I'd do is first tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about my interests, why I'm really excited about being a member of the new party, what it means to me, and talk a little bit about kind of the political situation in this country, and then really open it up for questions and answers, maybe about what we're doing here locally or what's going on at a national level.
What we're talking about tonight is probably the biggest issue of America's history. I mean, we're not talking about just the biggest thing that's happened in this century. We're talking about a disease right now that is taking our military. And when I present this information without the documentation, it's very, very hard for people to even imagine that this could happen in America. I mean, it couldn't happen in America. This is just, America wouldn't tolerate this. And so this is going to be difficult for a lot of people to hear tonight. It's going to be difficult for those that are Gulf War veterans. To have to hear it for the first time on a radio, TV show is not the way to do it.
Gideon Bible here with today's memory verse.
Remember, Exodus 14:13 says, "Don't be afraid. Just stand where you are and watch the Lord rescue you." Now say it with me. Well,
From Court 2. Come on, man. And with the local DBC news, MLJ with a triumphant comeback. But tonight, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I'm rocking my pants, flipping suckers in beer, making the dance rain down like a monsoon. Listen to the bass go boom, explosion. Overpowering over the competition. I'm towering, wrecking shots. When I drop these lyrics that'll make you call the cops. Don't you dare stare. You better move. Don't ever compare. Beat to the rest that'll all get sliced and diced. Competition's paying the price. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. Don't you call this a regular jam. I'm gonna rock this land. I'm gonna take this city bitty world by storm. And I'm just getting warm. Bombers, bombers, I'm ready. I think I'm gonna bomb a town. Get down. Don't you never, ever pull my lever. Cause I explode. And my 9 is easy to load. I gotta thank God. Cause he gave me the strength to rock.
Okay, we're back. We just saw a 20-minute clip of work produced here at MCAT in the last 10 years. I know for a fact over 1,300 people have worked or taken responsibility for programming here in that time, and about, well, it must be up to about 3,800 people had gone through the training, of which we're not really doing a facsimile of tonight. So we're going to be back with our guests. I did want to mention that the last clip that we saw in there was called Collective Effort. The program is still kind of going on, so maybe some of its, primary fulminating energy has dissipated a little bit. But the point I wanted to make about that show, in terms of local origination and a sense of like hyper-regional identity in media, is that something that really attracted a lot of people to that show was that they could be at home watching television, pick up the phone and dial 542-6228, and they'd see the phone ring on television. They just got no endless amount of joy out of doing that. And then being able to talk to the people through the medium, because it kind of brought this real distant and seemingly unresponsive thing into their control. Like they reverse the situation. Like I call and I change the course of what I'm watching. And it's got a lot of interactive wazoos to it. How interactive character really does get people excited. But especially when it takes such an institutional form as television is. It's kind of like public sculpture, right? Like, oh, everyone has to agree on this sculpture and where we place it because it reflects the entire society. But I just wanted to point that out. I mean, even when Collective Effort was rerun, the phone would just ring off the hook. And they just get so disappointed, like, oh, well, they did that yesterday. Something like that. 2 kids came in today, Shane and I can't think of the other guy's name, but they want to do a version of that. Yeah. So if anyone is out there watching and interested in working in a show like Collective Effort, feel free to stop on by.
How about the Australian talking book? Will that be done?
Yes. Jan was in today and said that she had more shows that she wanted to work on. Yeah. So So I don't know. We didn't get a great chance to look at all of the stuff there. I mean, you saw that a lot of it was informational in nature, where people had a special event and they wanted to tape it and make sure more people were able to get that information out of a lecture or a concert or something like that. So there's that part. But anyway, I kind of what I really wanted to make that point about was that TV telephone connection, because I think that really resonates with people.
You guys have any questions you want to ask? Go for it.
Well, I just want to know, like, if I took a camera out and took it back home and had some people over for dinner and just filmed, videotaped people talking at dinner and brought it back and edited it and stuff here, would you air that? I mean, would MCAT air that?
Right.
I mean, what are the parameters for what you'll decide to air?
Right. What are the limits of narrowcasting?
Yeah,
That's kind of what
that's
you're
a
saying
really nice way to
in
put it.
terms of interest level.
Yeah.
And I think really the only appropriate answer is there aren't.
Wow.
In that regard. So that if someone is doing something incredibly mundane, and they're doing it with this is what I want to share with the community. There's not a judgmental mechanism in place, at least right now, anyway, to say this is of no interest to anyone. We just don't have that kind of mechanism in place. And part of that, I think part of that element of that non-judgmental character is the place only works on volunteer effort. I mean, you could point to the fact that there's like a staff, and the staff people are paid and stuff like that, but we could not generate this amount of programming if that were the case. You need like an army of folks, 30, 40 times more. So the only way it works is by volunteer effort. And you can't generate a lot of volunteer effort by being judgmental with volunteers. Like, oh, well, you tried, go try again. Come back when the sound is better and stuff like that, So, I mean, that kind of, to answer your question, everyone is still in the social contract, whatever that is. So if you decide, that your day of like getting up in the morning and eating cereal, you're going out to get the paper, this is something you want to share, we're not here to say that's not acceptable.
It's oftentimes the more sort of narrow it gets, the more fascinating it becomes to people. One of the most popular shows in Seattle is a woman, a really large woman, who sits naked in front of the camera and talks about her life and talks about.
It's like Wendy's World or something. She's available on the internet 24 hours a day.
She's a superstar now.
Yeah.
But,
okay, we've got 10 minutes, so it's time, you guys, to do the tour of the facility. So Jason's going to pick up a different camera. We'll just give him a little time to get ready. He's got it on his shoulder. Okay.
So there's no obscenity laws against being naked on camera?
We can talk about those.
Yeah, that's program 3, you guys. Programming policy is definitely program 3. It's nothing that we're going to shy away from. So we're moving out of the studio now into what is kind of the cable cast area. Yeah, we're coming around the bend to Mary and Lori, who are also staff members here at MCAT. So in this area, we're getting feedback if somebody's got crown.
It's number 3. Microphone number 3.
Yeah, and also because you have the monitors up on the speaker, so I can't get too close. Okay, there, we're doing a little better. So, I don't know, Jason, can you kind of come around here, too? And so people can see that there are a series of decks here, and these decks are programmed by a computer now to run programming successively. So right now we're able to do programming like an hour, 2 hours, 2 hours, and another 2 hours at best. So there's still a fair amount of attending to this during the day while we're helping people, while we're training people, while we're running the facility. So sometimes our attention to producers coming in seems kind of scattered, like, oh, gee, they have stuff to do. So, and that's just a factor for people coming. This is a lot better. Like before, it was like throwing a log on the fire at 2:59. Now it's kind of like throwing a log on the fire between 2:30 and 3. So it doesn't really reduce the amount of work we have, but it condenses it, the cable cast work, so we have a little more time to deal with folks when they come in. And this is the control room that affects the cameras that we were on and the camera that Jason is on now. It has the ability to dissolve between one camera and another. You can incorporate pre-recorded tape in the show or as a background with that chroma key effect. And then the sound can be controlled with a soundboard where people can also add CD music or audio cassette tape as well.
Can you do funny wipes and fades?
Yeah, I mean, this has got a number of funny wipes and fades. Not an extraordinary one. You could do split screen, where you appear to talk to yourself or double yourself up or have insets and things like that. Here is where the pages are made for the community calendar. So people can send us something like this. They can fax us at 721-6014 or email mcat@mcat.org. And we kind of, we do what we can. I don't know if Jason can get a shot of this. I kind of enjoy this work, and there's a fair amount of it. I think we probably process, I don't know, at last count, I thought in '99 we did about 2,200 of these things. But it has different clip art and stuff in it, and you could spend a little bit of time, making a small graphic design. We kind of have to balance it against the need. No, probably the training curve would be too high. But they can bring us, we have a scanner, so if people have, letterhead or some other element that they want to incorporate in that, we can keep it there for them and refer to that clip.
It sounds like a lot of work. How many people work here full-time?
Oh, that's a good question. Nobody right now works here full-time. We're all part-timers. It's a pretty intense environment. I mean, I do 35 hours a week. Meredith's 28, Lori 24, Tracy 15. It's almost like your name has to end in a Y to work here. But Rose, who does 20. But, so I don't know how many hours a week that is, 80 or something like that. But see, we couldn't produce shows. We're here to facilitate them. So we're moving here. I think I asked Adam if we could visit him in Edit 2, and he said, okay. I'm just going to check. So Edit 2 is one of the more sophisticated edit facilities. It allows combining of imagery, A/B roll, fixing of soundtracks somewhat with graphic equalizers and things like that. Adam? Oh, no, it's John. Hey, John, do you want to be on TV? Is it okay? No. I'm just giving a tour. Do I want to? Yeah. No. Okay. Can we just poke the camera in here a sec? Okay. Turn your head away, man. Okay. This fellow doesn't want to be on TV. We don't mind if we take a peek. He's working in Edit 2. It's got a character generator and the ability to combine two moving images together in what's called A/B roll. And it has a lot of different effects. Provides a turntable for records, cassette player, CD player, and then something of a graphic equalizer in the way of the mixing board. And then you can see there's programming going on. Thanks, Mr. X, for allowing us to visit. People do store their tapes here, sometimes for years at a time. But if they're big, they're bulky, working on a project, people can carve out space, provided it's labeled, and have it there. Producers work here a lot, sometimes 12 hours a day, so there's always something going on. Hey, you guys, I'm doing a show for MCAT, and we're on the air, but I just want to see if it's okay to pop in and just look. Okay, is it all right? Okay. All right, thanks. So this, you guys, is kind of the reception room area, and I'm going to have to lower this or we'll get feedback. But you can see it's kind of small, and we are grappling with different issues of like, how can we provide, here's Edit 1, for instance, with a kind of room divider, a dub station for making copies of work. But how can we provide people privacy, to do their work, and at the same time have meeting places where people can get together and discuss the shows? And we're still kind of grappling. Lori says there's 5 minutes left to our show. So we're still kind of grappling with that kind of stuff. It's like we need more room. I mean, now we're in the studio, so sometimes the studio can serve that function, for overflow of folks and stuff like that. Sorry, Heidi.
Sorry, Joel.
Here's the office. We see board member Michael Reagan, busy on the phone.
My agent.
He's a...
Pissed I got canceled off the show.
Well, he just couldn't go on the tour. There wasn't room. I don't know, Jason, if you can swing in here, you can see where most of the equipment is stored. And you could just get a small idea of the stuff that's here. There are 3 different lighting kits. Each one is a little bigger. There's a nice, easy Tota lighting kit there. And then some sophisticated cameras, one of which Jason is using, super cams that have really excellent lenses on them and no automatic anything. And then more typically, we check out a small camera that some people may have seen in the show in the studio that has a number of automatic features, and it has a special effects kind of built in, like a very small nature, like that. Of the programming people have produced in the past, we've been kind of archiving them. They are on database. We've been working on making that database kind of searchable friendly so that we could put in keywords. So we want to look on work done on feminism and then get tape numbers. So the tapes are kind of stored, in numeric order, but then they correspond to the database. And we check out tapes right now for free for people to use. You can use 10 tapes per project of either format, though most of the stuff we have now is shot on this SVHS tape. It's all better than VHS, but you can do post-production on the now antiquated 3/4 inch, though it's a very stable image and it makes really good subsequent copies. It seems like the decks aren't being that supported anymore. So that's kind of shocking.
If you wanted to watch one of the archive tapes, can you take them home or make a copy?
Well, you can't take them home, but what you could do is reserve time at the dub station or one of the edit stations, so you'd be able to look at it. Or, if someone was a local archivist historian, actually wanted to look through 10 years of material, because I think that's getting real interesting, the notion of private lives and historiography. Like what are some of the smaller stories that contribute to an understanding of a particular point in time, like that. But yeah, that's been kind of slow going. Volunteers have helped, by looking at program contracts, which everyone fills out saying, I am the producer of this. Okay, Lori's saying there are 2 minutes left to our show, but that I'm the producer of the show, it's my content. And then often we ask for a brief description. And then to help people out, we also have pre-production plans that people fill out. So it kind of says, well, how much crew would you need for your show? Or who is your intended audience? How would you, think of publicizing the show through different outlets? And some people have done that. They've taken out ads, to have people. Jason's beckoning us out. I think he wants us in the studio to wrap up. Oh, because we haven't seen Edit 3 at all. Duh. Okay. So this is the latest acquisition to MCAT, and that's the computer non-linear edit system. And it rather than having to, when you use the analog tape and you make a decision, often it gets set in analog stone. Like if you decide 2 minutes into your show that you'd like to add 30 seconds to the show, in the analog world you have to start all over again from that insert point because the tape is never going to stretch. You're always copying. It's never made longer by an act of will. This system is highly flexible. It gives little picons for the shots that you'd use, and you arrange them kind of symphonically in sequence on this side. And I had loaded just a few things. I don't know if Jason can get a look at.
So if we came in here then, are there sessions that we can sign up for to learn how to use this? I mean, it seems pretty complicated.
It's pretty complicated. As I said, the basic orientation, and Jason does a really good job of videography training after how to use MCAT, that is one of the few group training activities that go on here. Most of it is by arrangement, and it's a one-on-one teaching situation. So you get me, Lori, Mary, Tracy to show you how to use Edit 3 for as long as your learning curve might require. Okay, I guess we better go back in because we only have one more minute. Watch your back.